Muse for you, awesome websites without code.
Hey, what's up musers? John with Muse for You, here to help you build awesome websites without code. And this is episode 2 of the GSAP and Adobe Muse series. So if you're part of the subscription, you just received an update today. Muse Motion has been updated to Muse Motion 1.3. And this tutorial is going to be to showcase the new updates and to showcase some unique things that you can do with Muse Motion. So I have this example website here. It says Design in Muse. And if I click refresh, we see we have these block reveals revealing the text. So I really like this effect. I think it's a really unique effect. When a user first visits the website, you just have this block revealing the text in a really interesting way. And then we have the big menu. This was also updated, I believe, yesterday. And it's using GSAP technology to rotate the icons. This icon here is not rotating, but if you do decide to rotate, the close button or the open button, that's using GSAP technology as well. So just a simple site with some unique and interesting animations. I'm going to showcase how to create this in Adobe Muse. And before I do that, I'll quickly go over the new updates to Muse Motion. So it's Muse Motion 1.3. So there's a new widget setup. There's the ability to choose from 1 motion, 4 motions, 8 motions, and 12 motions. So I wanted to add more functionality to the widgets, but when you add a lot of widget options, that can slow down how the widget opens, and it's not fun if you're building your site and a widget takes a few seconds to open. So I decided, if you only need 1 motion or even 2 or 3, you could select 1 motion or 4 motions and the widget would load really quickly. If you do decide to use 12 motions, that is a lot of widget options, but if you're going through the trouble of creating that many motions anyways, then a few seconds opening the widget won't really matter because you're going to spend time developing that motion to begin with. So here we have the next update is ability to set a custom transformation for each motion, and I'll show that when I show the widget. And I added the rotate X, rotate Y, scale X, scale Y, and border radius to the transformations. There's the ability to trigger the motion with another element. So you can hover over an element and it'll trigger another element, which I think is a really cool feature, and I'll showcase that as well. And also I added the color widgets to change the background color or font color of an element multiple times. So you can have a really interesting website with different elements changing colors and things like that. I added the preset widget for easily adding certain animations to elements. So the presets that I added are the block reveal preset that I just showcased, the infinite rotation, so you can have an element just infinitely rotate. So if you wanted to add like a wheel animation, you could use this preset. And I added the bouncy ball preset, so if you wanted to have an element look like a bouncy ball, you could add that as well. And there's some updated code within the widget. So yeah, the block reveal, this is the block reveal effect I just showed. So I'll go ahead and get started on showcasing the Muse Motion 1.3. There are a few other examples of the block reveal that I'll show real quick before I get into it. So this one is the text is centered, so that looks pretty cool. The next one, I wrote Muse for You. And the next one is this on scroll example. So if I scroll, the blocks reveal on scroll. All right, looks good. So I'll go ahead and get started. We're gonna work with the block reveal effect, and I'm just gonna quickly go through how to create that. And then I'll show the presets and some of the new updates to the Muse Motion widget. So I'll go to File, New Site, and I'll create a new site in Muse. I'll double click on the home page and I'll go to the library panel. If you don't see the library panel, you can go to Window and click on Library. And here I'll type in Muse Motion. So here we have the Muse Motion 1.3. So this is what the widgets look like now. I numbered them 0, 1 through 10, so 0, 2, just so that they're in order. So one of the updates with the Muse Motion 1.3 is that you only need to add the add first widget if you're adding on scroll animation, or if you want to trigger the motion on scroll. So if your motion is triggered on load, on hover, on hover with reverse or on click, you don't need to add the add first widget. And then we have the different motions. So we have Muse Motion, one motion. So you can apply a simple transformation to an element, one color. So you can change an element to the background color, the font color once. Then we have 4 motions, choose from 1 through 4, 4 colors, choose from 1 through 4, 8 motions, 1 through 8, 8 colors, 1 through 8, 12 motions, you can choose from 1 through 12 motions, and 12 colors, 1 through 12 colors. And then we have this Muse Motion Various, which is similar to the first Muse Motion. I didn't want to delete that in case you did like working with that widget. It basically has all the different transformations listed. This will make more sense actually when I showcase the widget. So for now, what I'm gonna do is just drop in Muse Motion, one motion, so I can showcase the new widget options. So I'm just gonna click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse. And just a few new things, let's see here. Oh, so now we have, here, let me zoom in again. So if you select any motion start besides on load, we now have this trigger graphic style name. So you can apply this graphic style name to any element on the site. So when you hover over that element, it will trigger the element that has this graphic style. So that's kind of a cool feature. You can create really interesting animations by hovering over one element, and then it triggers this element here. If you wanted the same element to trigger itself, just make sure that the graphic style name and the trigger graphic style name are the same. Okay, so that's one update. So the biggest update with the Muse Motion widget is the motion properties here. So before, you'd go through the list, and maybe it'll be better if I show the various here. So with the various, you could select the different options here. So you'd click and the different transformations are listed here. So now with the new update, it's really simple. The transform property is actually a list. So you can just select from the list these different properties. So I could say rotate, rotate X, rotate Y, scale, scale X, scale Y, skew, translate, width, height, and border radius. So rotate X, rotate Y, scale X, and scale Y, and border radius have been added to the transformations. So you can just select any transformation here, and then you can select the value for the transformation or the motion, and then the unit of measurement. So you can select pixels, percentage, degrees, radians, or none. And in the widget folder, there's actually a guide that lets you know what unit of measurement pertains to what transformation. So I thought this was a bit better rather than having this all these widget options for each transform property. I just added a list, and then you can select the unit of measurement. And this makes it easier to add multiple motions to one element. Okay, so that was probably the biggest update there. The on scroll got a bit of an update. Rather than having a few options here, you can just check, play once. If you only want the element to play once on scroll, just select play once. And if you want it to repeat on scroll, just uncheck play once. Before there were a few other options, but I just simplified it here rather than having two options, one that said repeat and one that said play once. So that was another update there. So the other update is that we now have these color widgets. So if I bring in the color, it's basically the same as the motion, except for the transform property. We can change the background color and the font color, and then you can select the color here, and then work with the transform properties here as well. So we'll go over all of this in this tutorial. I'm going to quickly go over how to create a block reveal effect just to show how to use the new widget, and then I'll go over a few other options within the Muse Motion widget. So let's go ahead and get started with creating that block reveal effect, where we have an element expand from right to left, and then as it goes from left to right, it reveals text. So let's go ahead and get started with that. The first thing I'm going to do is create the element. So I'm going to go to the rectangle tool here to the left, and I'm going to create a rectangle just like this. And I have a few colors in my CC libraries, so I'll just give it that color there. And there we have the rectangle, and then I'll create some text. So I'll just create a text block, and I'll type in design. I'll format it a bit. Let's do Futura. Let's make it a bit larger, 72, and I'll center it. Okay, and I think that's it. Maybe add a little bit of tracking, something like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. So then I'll just place this text. I'll place it here for now on top of the rectangle. So now I'll bring in the Muse Motion widget. So I'll go to the library panel, type in Muse Motion, and I'll bring in the Muse Motion. I want to bring in 4 motions for this because there's a few different things going on with this animation here. So I'll bring in Muse Motion, 4 motions. So I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse. And here we can see for 4 motions, we can set 1 through 4 different motions for the element. So just like that, we have the widget here. And in the widget, the graphic style name is Motion 1. So I want to apply this graphic style name to this rectangle. So I'll click on the rectangle. I'll go to the graphic styles panel here to the right. If you don't see the graphic styles panel, you can go to Window and click on graphic styles. And here I'll create a new graphic style by clicking on this icon here. I'll double click on style and I'll rename this to Motion 1. Then I'll click OK. All right, so now this element has the graphic style Motion 1 applied to it. So let me move design here for now actually, and let's just work with this element. So now I'll open the widget options, and the graphic style and settings, all these options here, I'm gonna leave it as is. I do want the motion to start on load, so that's good there. All right, so now let's go to Motion 1 and let's work with the motion. So for this motion, I want it to open up from the right to the left. So what I'm gonna do is for the animation start, I'm gonna say from, and I'm gonna say scale X, because I want it to get wider on the X, or scale in width. So I'm gonna say scale X, and I want it to start at an initial scale 0, which means it's not visible. And the unit of measurement, I'm gonna say none, because for the scale property, you don't need a unit of measurement. And on the transform origin X, I wanna bring it all the way to the left. So 0 on the x-axis brings it all the way to the left, so the motion will start from the left side of the element and will expand to the right. Okay, and the transform origin y can be left at 50% because we're just dealing on the x-axis. We don't need to change the y-axis here. For the duration, I'm going to say 0.5 to make it a bit quicker. And for the easing options, I'm going to say expo, so it gives it a bit of a curve for the easing. And I'm going to say ease in out, so there's a bit of a easing in the beginning and the ending of the motion. So if I preview, let's see how that looks. So we can see it goes from left to right. We also notice that we can see the element a little bit before it starts, and we're going to work on that a bit. So let's go back into Muse Motion and let's add another motion. So here I'm going to say enable motion 2, and this time I want it to go from the ending position. So the first motion went from left to right, so now I want it to go from right to left. So here for the animation start, I'm going to say 2. The transformation property, I'm going to say scale X. The motion value, I'm going to say 0 because I want it to go back to 0. And then the unit of measurement, I'll say none. The transform origin, I'm going to say 100, so it starts on the right. Yeah, so it goes from left to right and then right to left. Okay. So that way it closes from the right, and it'll make more sense in a second when I preview the animation. The duration, I'm going to say 0.5, and I'm going to set a 0.5 delay so that the first motion plays and then this one plays, because remember the first motion was set to 0.5. All right, and then the easing option, I'm going to say the same easing, easing expo, and then ease in out. So one thing that might be helpful, because I know I'm saying a lot of things right now and it's a lot of information, you might just want to write down what you want your animation to do and then go through the Muse Motion and set all the properties after you've kind of written or drawn what you want your animation or motion to do. It is a lot of information, so it might take a bit of time to work with the widget. It's a bit of a learning curve. So this series is just to make it as easy as possible for when you're working with the Muse Motion widget and these different transformations and values here. Okay, so we added motion 2, and now I'll preview. So let's see how that looks. Goes from left to right, and then it closes from the right. Perfect. So we can see the transform. So let's say on the scale X, the first one we set the transform property, the origin X to 0, so it starts here on the left. And then on the second motion, we set the transform to 100, so it starts on the right. The x-axis starts on the right, so we have that motion coming from the left and closing from the right. Okay, so one thing that I want to fix here is that we can see the element before it animates. So let's go back into the Muse Motion widget and let's add another motion. So I'm going to enable motion 3, and the animation start I'm going to say 2, and this time I'm going to say opacity. So we're going to have an opacity to the element so it's not initially visible, and the opacity I'm going to say 1. And before I do that, let me kind of explain what I'm doing here. So here I'm going to select this element and I want the initial opacity to be 0. So with the element selected, I'm going to go to the upper control bar here in Muse, and here we have the opacity option, and I'm going to set it all the way to 0 so that it's not initially visible. And then with the Muse Motion widget, I'm going to make it visible by applying that opacity transform property. So we can see the element's not initially visible. So now when I go back into the motion, I'm going to set the opacity to, and it's going to go to an opacity of 1, which is the same as 100%. The unit of measurement is none because the opacity doesn't have a unit of measurement. And for the transform origin, I'm going to say 0 because it's going to start at the same time as motion 1. This transform would override motion 1 because they're starting at the same time. So I just want to make sure that this transform origin is the same as motion 1. Okay, and then the duration, I'm going to say 0 because I want it to start right away, or I don't want it to kind of fade or anything like that. And then for the delay, I'm going to set a 0.01 delay. So that way it doesn't start right away, but you can barely notice it. So basically, because we set the opacity of 0 on the element, it's not going to be initially visible, but after 0.01 seconds, this motion is going to kick in and it's going to set the opacity to 1. So that way we don't see that element before it animates. So there we go. And then for the easing, I'll set it to linear and ease none because we don't really need any easing on this opacity option. Okay, so just like that, I'll preview, and there we go. Perfect. We don't see that block before it reveals. We have this nice motion. Okay, so now what I want to happen is this design text to appear after it goes from right to left, or yeah, after it disappears from the right. So what I'll do here is I'll bring in another Muse Motion widget. So I'll type in Muse Motion, and I only need one motion for this one. So I'll just bring in one motion, and I'll click, hold, and drag and place into Adobe Muse. And for the graphic style name here, I'll just say Motion 2 because it's going to be a different graphic style name. And I don't need to worry about the trigger graphic style because it's on load. If it was on hover, then I'd kind of work with the trigger graphic style name, but because it's on load, it's going to load right away anyways. All right, so there we have Motion 2, and for Motion 2, for this text, let's go ahead and apply the graphic style name Motion 2. So I'll grab the text and I'll go to the graphic styles panel, create a new graphic style, double click, and I'll call this Motion 2, and I'll click OK. All right, so there we have Motion 2 applied to the element, and now let's work with the motion properties. So here I'll say animation start, we'll say 2, and we're going to say opacity, and we're going to say 1. So again, I'm going to set the opacity of this element to 0 because we don't want it to be initially visible. So we'll set it to 0, and let's grab this one here, and I'll just place it in here. I might have to make these visible really quick just so I can center them within each other. So just like that, and I'll just grab these, align to selection, and just center them. Perfect. Okay, and let's bring them back to 0, both of these, the opacity. All right, so now let's go into here. So the opacity is going to go to an opacity of 1. Because it's at 0, it's going to go from 0 to 1. Unit of measurement, none. Transform origin, 50-50 is okay because the text isn't coming in from any direction. It's just going to fade in or just appear in after 0.5 seconds. So yeah, the duration is going to be 0. We don't need a duration on it, but I want the delay to be 0.5 because the first motion of that rectangle was 0.5 seconds. So after 0.5 seconds of its initial reveal, the text is going to show, and then the rectangle is going to disappear. So we set the delay to 0.5, and then for the easing option, I'm going to say expo, and then easing type, I'll say ease, or actually no, the easing is linear because it's just kind of appearing, so we don't need any easing on it. So linear and ease none. All right, so that's it for the motion, and let's see how that looks. So the text is on front, so we're going to see how that looks really quick. So block, and then the text appears in the front. So all we have to do here is right click or click on the text box here, right click, arrange, and send to back, so it's behind the rectangle. So now if I preview, we have the block and then the text reveals. Perfect. So just like that, you can have a text block reveal with the Muse Motion widget. It's a really nice effect. You can work with the easing options to get creative with how it reveals. I could do something like elastic. It's 0.5 seconds isn't much time for it to be elastic, but we can see it kind of bounces in, and then it bounces out. So these are really nice easing options. You can get really creative with how the motion occurs. So there we go. We have a nice block reveal effect. So that's basically it for this effect. One thing I did want to showcase is that I do have it as a preset. So when you download Muse Motion 1.3, I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these. If you go to the library panel, and I'll type in Muse Motion, we have these Muse Motion presets. So in the widget folder, there's Muse Motion widget presets, and block reveal is one of the presets. So you can literally just click, hold, and drag and place into Adobe Muse. And just like that, if I preview, we have the effect. So everything I just covered is now a preset, so you can just drag and drop into Adobe Muse. You would just have to apply the graphic style names to the rectangle and the text box, and set the opacity for both of those to 0. And then just drop in the preset, and you're good to go. So that's basically it. Looks good. So one thing I'll cover is, let's say you wanted it to occur on scroll. You'll just have to bring in the Muse Motion add first on scroll. So here I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse, and I'll change the starting options for both of these to on scroll, just like that. And for this one, the motion start, I'll select on scroll. Okay, and we'll add some web page height, and I'll bring this down. So now when I preview and I scroll down, it occurs on scroll, just like that. And initially I have it to play once. I think it's kind of nice when it only plays once. That way the user's not always seeing these interactions or these animations as they're scrolling. They might want to read some text on the site, but initially it's cool. They scroll down and they have this nice block reveal effect over this text. All right, looks good. So I'll just cover a few things. One thing I did want to cover was the new trigger graphic style name option. So let me just delete this here, and this here, and here. So let's go over that real quick. So for this, I'm just gonna create an element. So just like this, and we'll just give it a color, and let's give it just one of these colors here. And I'll just copy this element, Command C and Command V to copy, and then I'll paste, or I'll change the color there. So we have these two elements. So I'm gonna bring in the Muse Motion widget, one motion, just for a quick example. So Muse Motion, one motion, and I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse. And for the motion, I'm gonna set the motion start to on hover, and the trigger graphic style name, I'm gonna say motion 2. So I'm gonna assign motion 1 to this element and motion 2 to this element. So here I'll go to the graphic styles panel, I'll say motion 2 and motion 1. All right, so let's change the color here because it saved the graphic style properties from the last example. So I'll just change that there. So we have motion 1 and motion 2, perfect. So let's work with the motion. I'll go to the motion 1 and we'll have it rotating at 360 degrees. So yeah, here are the units of measurements. There is a guide in the widget folder on the different units of measurement. So rotate can be in degrees or radians. Okay, so there we go. So now I'll preview and let's see how this looks. So this is motion 2. When I hover over this rectangle, this element animates, and that's because the trigger graphic style name is motion 2. This element has motion 2 applied to it, and this is motion 1. So when we interact with this element will animate. So that's just a cool feature there. So see, nothing happens with this element, but when I hover over this element, this first element animates. If you wanted this element to animate itself, you could just make the the graphic style name and the trigger graphic style name the same. So if I wanted that element to hover or to rotate when I hover over it, then just set the graphic style name and the trigger graphic style name to the same thing. All right, so just wanted to cover that really quick. So I'll just go over a few of the other presets, and I think that'll be it for this video. So I'll leave motion 1 here. This element has motion 1 applied to it. So I'll delete this here, and let's go into the library panel. I'll type in Muse Motion. So here we have a few other presets. We have bouncy ball and infinite rotation. So I'll bring in infinite rotation. I'll click, hold, and drag, place into Adobe Muse. The graphic style name is motion 1, which we've already applied to this element. So I'll go ahead and preview. And just like that, this element will infinitely rotate. So it's a nice preset, you know, it could be cool for like a wheel or anything like that. So that's one of the presets, and the next preset is bouncy ball. So right here we have bouncy ball. So I'll click, hold, and drag, place right in there, and I'll preview, and it just bounces. So it'll look better if, yeah, I'll delete this, and we'll just create an ellipse with the ellipse tool. And I'll hold down Shift to create a perfect circle. And I'll give it a color here, and the graphic styles, I'll apply motion 1 to it. So there we have it, and let's make it a little bit smaller, maybe 200. Okay, and I'll preview, just like that. So we have a bouncy ball. All right, looks good. So I just wanted to add those presets, just in case you wanted to quickly add these animations to your website. And the last thing I'm going to showcase is the color widgets. So here I'm going to type in Muse Motion, and I'm going to scroll down, and here we have the color. I'm going to select 4 colors, and I'm going to click, hold, and drag, and place into Adobe Muse. So with the color widgets, they're just like the motion widgets. You just select background color or font color, and then select the color. So this is applying to motion 1. So we'll see that circle change colors. So let's see how that looks. So I'll preview in the browser. So the ball is changing colors and it's bouncing. Looks good. So let me go ahead and enable all of these colors so we can see it change a few colors. And I'm gonna have it infinitely repeat. So I'll say -1 here, and I'll preview. So timescale here, if I were to change this to higher, it just speeds up the whole animation. So rather than having to individually go through and speed up the different settings, you could just change the timescale for all of the motions or colors, and it would make the motion slower or faster. So 1 is a normal speed, anything higher than 1 is faster, anything lower than 1 is slower. And you can set -1 to infinitely repeat the motion. All right, so let's preview page in browser. So we can see that ball is changing colors and it's bouncing. All right, looks good. So that's basically it for the new update. You can do a lot with this widget. There'll be many more videos where I showcase how to create interesting animations with the Muse Motion widget. And as a side note, one thing I'm hoping Adobe Muse does at some point is that they create, you know, a widget panel. So rather than having these widgets here on the side, you could just drag the widget and it becomes like a widget in a list. So you can click the drop down, and this would work specifically for widgets that use graphic styles. A lot of my widgets use graphic styles. So I'm hoping that there'll be like a list where you can just put the widget in a list, and this widget container here wouldn't be visible, but just from the list, it would show all the properties, and you could work with the widget options from that list. Because it can be, you know, when you have a lot of animations, if you have a lot of widgets here, I'm sure a lot of you have already experienced that, having, you know, quite a few widgets here on the left and things like that. So I might talk with the Adobe Muse team because I think that would be a really cool feature. Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover in this tutorial. I do like the idea of being able to choose from 1, 4, 8, and 12 motions, just because if you know you're not going to work with that many motions, you don't have to look at a lot of widget options. You can just specifically work with those specific amount of motions and transformations for the element. So that's it for this video tutorial. This is episode 2 of GSAP and Adobe Muse. To gain access to Muse Motion and Muse Motion 2, you can simply go to museforyoushop.com, and here you can click subscribe today, and here you can click subscribe now to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. Here we have the Muse Motion 2 widget. This is more for sequencing animations or different elements with different graphic styles, and this will be updated as well, so that'll be in a few weeks. And we have the Muse Motion widget, which is right here. So here you can click on Muse Motion. Here you can click Add to Cart to purchase individually, or again, you can click Subscribe to get access to all widgets and any new widgets I come out with for $39 a year. Here are the features included, a few of the widget options, the changelog, and a few videos that pertain to the older versions, but they still have relevant information on how to use the widget there. So that's it for this video tutorial. Again, I do this to help you build awesome websites without code. If you like this video tutorial, you can subscribe below. Also in the show more section below are links to other resources and links to musefreeshop.com. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video tutorial. Thank you.
Muse for you, awesome websites without code.